Just to be clear, I'm not doing a week of springers or anything, but I don't think there's a better time to do this anymore considering recent events. Like the last video, and one other thing I will get to in a minute. Honestly, this video both should have been made a long time ago, and also totally makes sense that it wasn't made until now. And this might be the last opportunity I have to make this at a good time. But first, I'm trying to hit 10k subscribers in the next 2 months. I've pretty much given up on that at this point, as it would mean getting another 2,500 by August, but I think 9,000 is doable. Though, over the last week, my subscriber growth has suddenly literally stopped, and I've not gotten a new sub in 3 days. So, if you enjoyed this video by the end, please consider subscribing. And if you can, share the video around. Anyways, Springer is my brother's favorite character, and a while back I got him Open in Play's Big Spring, which was a fantastic figure, and I always wanted one of my own after that. Unfortunately, it seemed like Open in Play went out of business immediately after that, disappearing off the face of the map, so I couldn't pick up one of their Springers anymore. Though, I did recognize it as having a few problems like a bad face sculpt anyways. So, when Robot Hero popped up, and it was obviously Open in Play with a new name, the same figure, and a new, much better face sculpt, I jumped on the pre-order. When it finally came in stock, they shipped it to me, at which point I waited 6 months for it to arrive, which it never did. I was constantly contacting Shozi Store about it, and they just kept telling me to be patient, until eventually the package became listed as missing in transit, at which point I contacted them demanding a replacement because it was confirmed lost now, at which point they told me they couldn't because the figure was sold out. Fucking brilliant. They refunded me my money and I went looking for a new Airwolf somewhere else. And everywhere was sold out, so I was screwed out of getting one because Shozi used some cut-rate shipping company. Great. Here's the thing. It showed up the literal next day. So free review, everyone, but there was a problem. Everywhere was sold out. So why would I bother reviewing it if it's not for posterity like an old classic I want to put my 2 cents in on? Nor can it be to inform you whether or not you need to pick this thing up or avoid it, because it doesn't matter whether or not it's good, because you can't. It's not available anymore. So this thing just sat on my shelves ever since. But here's the thing. Just recently, it was re-released. So now, should you get this or should you avoid it? It's Robot Hero Airwolf, or the upgraded Open in Play Big Spring. I used to think this was a lot more show accurate than it actually is, but my recent epiphany about the show design with the last video really throws into stark contrast just how bad the Floro Deary design was. Sure, it's a classic and all that, but that thing was very clearly made by an artist and not a toy designer. Which is ironic because the original Open in Play figure was clearly designed by a toy designer and not an artist. That original face was the stuff of legend. So soft, so indistinct, so slightly Asian. This, with its new square jaw, looks a lot more like the show model. Though still not exactly, cause like with every version of the toy, the hood becomes the chest and not just a pervert bib resting on top of that. And honestly, the figure is better for it. He's also, much like the Siege version, much squarer than the actual show design. Though, this time his pauldrons are rotated 90 degrees from the Siege version. It's hilarious how I can't say that these split the difference between the show model and the Siege model, because it's actually the show model splitting the difference. That thing was at a 45. These are at a 90 and a 0. The tops of his shoulders are a little bit of a catastrophe. I wish these could have rotated so they were on top like the Siege figures, but the best they can do is rest on the backs of his arms, which is different to say the least, though I don't know that I can say that it's better or even as good. And this thing is huge feeling. I'm going to do size comparisons here because I always forget to do them, just like I always forget the question of the video. Question of the video: what do you need to complete an 86 movie lineup for your collections? I don't know what makes this feel so tall since it's normal MP scale, though I do want to point out that this thing is $80 people. Not 100, not 120, not 140, not well over 200 like some companies like to charge. This is the price of a commander. So to all those people who give 3p crap for being too expensive, how do you feel about this thing? Anyways, I think maybe part of what makes this figure look so tall are the legs are quite long. I don't find them as distracting as on some other figures, but they do make him look overall stretched out. Speaking of the legs, I wish this did more than just upgrade the head and give it more show-accurate colors because a few problems with the old figure still persist here. For starters, even though this isn't a problem the old figure had, the ratchets on his stage right thigh are too tight. So that leads to the problem the original figure actually had, where the transformation joint is too easy to engage, now being exacerbated. Also, while this is slightly upgraded and cool on its own, it's still a frustration, but his shirt unpegs too easily, causing him to ab crunch when you don't want him to. It's a little less prone in doing that here than on the normal figure, but it's still too common. It adds functionality, I just wish it only happened when I chose to make it happen, and not when I'm simply failing to be careful enough about it. The head is great, being so much more in line with the show model. At one point, me and my brother were both so frustrated with the face on the original, we were planning on sculpting our own, and basically giving them away for the cost of shipping so people could have a good Springer face. Now that this is out, we don't have to. The mug seems to be the wrong color, as I think it's supposed to be the faded olive of the thighs sticking out of his booty shorts, but I can't complain too much when those eyes rock this much. I love me some metallic paint, second only to chrome dyes, and these look great in almost all lighting conditions. It's a little interesting how on the Siege figure his forehead crest was too small, and here it's yellow when it should have been green, but it does pop more like this, and it adds some uniqueness to the head, so I do think it improves it. Ultimately, the head is great, as is the robot mode. It's got some very minor build issues, but I will take these any day of the week over the build problems of the Siege version. At least when this pops apart, nothing falls off of him, and it's easy to put back together. And the look of this thing may not be 100% accurate, but that is a near impossible design to get working. So what this does is capture the spirit of the design extremely well. And if you ask me, it captures it the best of any masterpiece-styled figures out there. Most of them really try to get the weird build of the design down, and I think they suffer for it. This figure allowed itself the freedom to only capture the vibe, and I think that's why it feels so unburdened by the design. Accessories are decent here. He comes with a gun. This is very clearly an afterthought. It's boring and unpainted, but at least he gets one. He comes with his missile. It's boring and unpainted. He has no way to hold this, so it's, for a practical matter, useless. And lastly, he comes with his sword, which is well painted in nice colors and well crafted, splitting into his top rotor, though I do have to say, I know why it's shaped like this, but it's still weird looking. The crossguard is on the wrong side of the sword, and it feels so very unnatural. Outside that, this is way better than the Siege's swords, because it may still be parts forming, but at least it's not 3 separate pieces that you have to combine to get added on after the fact. And there isn't a spare part that has no purpose in the other modes. Posability on this is really good. Way above average head, with rotation side to side, tons of down and up, though to get the up, you have to pull the head forwards, which means you get some action. Shoulders pull a 90 with some semi-backwards and forward butterfly because the joints are kind of triple hinged. You have to move the pauldrons, but maximum elbows. Wrist swiv, opening and closing hands, trigger finger, and you can open this panel for some sword-wielding wrists. Loose ab crunch, hips are unimpeded going forward and to the side and only slightly going back. Normal 90 knees, and feet with heel down, other toe down, and a rocker. So posing is pretty much excellent. The only average joints are the knees. Otherwise, everything else is well above average, with a slew of specialty joints like the wrists, abs, and shoulders, and great range on almost everything. Transformations are even good too. They're not anywhere near as complex as you'd think they'd have to be considering he's a triple changer, though maybe that just comes with the territory of turning into a car and a helicopter with the front half of a car. I'm honestly not sure which is harder. They are both really decent. The parts forming isn't even bad for the helicopter mode because I do get that engineering a rotor in is hard. It's so thin and long, it would have to fold in multiple places, and I honestly don't know if you should even bother making the windshield wider depending on the mode. Like, does anyone really care that his car mode had a slightly larger windshield likely due to animation errors? It's just an extra step that you don't really need. It doesn't come with instructions and you don't really require them. Nothing about either of these is all that different from a chug figure. It's plenty clever, and the first time I did this I managed to get confused by it, but I can't really explain that because this is pretty dead simple both ways. It's fun and I will gladly do this every time over the Siege. And the alt modes are chunky. I didn't know that vehicles could look out of shape. These are relatively accurate. The show models were a bit more stretched, these seem a little squished front to back, but otherwise they have all the correct details just in the wrong proportions. Both modes roll great. The tires on these are smooth as butter and made of rubber. And the helicopter rotors spin pretty decently, but they're a little wobbly and rough because of the mechanism they've used for it. Which, that mechanism is basically nothing, so it's impressive it works as well as it does. I have no idea how these rotors spin at all. I didn't know you could rocket science the engineering for a hole. The tail section even manages to be green all the way up until the rotor, which is an impressive detail to have managed in getting right. The worst thing about these two molds is the not even remotely hidden face sticking out of the bottoms of them, and the fact that some areas tab together a little too emphatically, making it kind of a pain getting certain things back apart. But otherwise, these are excellent, looking almost exactly like they're supposed to, just kind of squashed. Rear of the car is a little janky, but that's okay, and it's all worth putting up with for this amazing figure. Seriously, this thing is so damn good for so damn cheap. It's pretty much as good as we could ask for a design of this particular character being. Robot mode may not be perfectly 100% accurate, but it captures the spirit of the design remarkably well. There aren't a ton of accessories, but it comes with enough. The football missile really could have been integrated better though. Posing is actually top notch. Seriously, he's got most of the joints in the book, and they all tend to have a lot of range and hold extremely well. He's got great transformations that are actually fun and clever and don't stray into the domains of being too complex or too simple, and he's got 2 solid alt modes that maybe don't look perfect, but they look great for what they needed to be. And what's amazing about this whole thing is just the lack of drawbacks. There's not a fully negative feature on this thing. There are some minor annoyances, but nothing to really taint the overall experience. This figure is kind of the ultimate master of compromises. Sure, some things aren't perfect, but they had to give for everything else. And what they packed in is amazing. And all for the price of $80, which is complete madness. I don't know how they're making a profit on this. If you are even remotely interested in this thing, I say go for it. It's a lot of fun for what it is, and it's absurdly cheap. And that's not half what I have to say, but it's enough what I have to say. And I know, you know, what everyone else tells you to do at the end of these videos. So, if you liked what you saw here, please do that. And if you'd like to take it a step further, then please, share this video with any friend you think may be interested. I hope you all enjoyed listening to me waste your time.